And I've noticed that, um,
I
okay,
pressed it in the middle. Sorry. Go ahead.
all right.
Sorry, Mike.
And yeah, I was wondering if I'm doing right, if I'm doing it good. um, but I really liked the thing that I was going in the zone also, and I noticed the difference with my eyes closed, and I always wanted to close my eyes, but then I go more into a process, and I'm not holding space. They're telling me, but that's something I'm in between what to do, because I like it more with my eyes closed, and go for it all also. So yeah, that's a bit my
Mm.
question.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Like in the trainings that we hold, a lot of people can't listen without closing their eyes. And then when they learn to hold space, it's similar. They cannot keep their eyes open. But even more so, there are a lot of people cannot listen to the information while sitting up. They literally have to lay down for them to receive the information. That's even a lot more intense or deep, because we're accessing certain things in the mind and in the body in a different way. So in fact, when someone goes really, really deep and it becomes hard to take them outside of the intensity, the instructions that we give is open your eyes, because they eventually went super duper deep, and it has something to do with keeping the eyes closed. So we're definitely tapping into something. Yeah, I know LNT, La Nueva Therapy. A lot of people correlate inner dance to that. I'm glad you experienced it in Spain. Matt, hear from you.
Yeah, I felt like sharing briefly. I just recently started facilitating. I talked with Pi kind of privately about it, I don't know, maybe a month ago or something. And I set the intention to start doing classes. And it's been incredibly interesting how my life has changed since I just was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And just, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even know really where to start. I mean, I definitely know how to hold space and do all that kind of thing. But as far as like getting people to come, but it really just happened naturally. I think what's been interesting for me is like when you make a decision, especially around this particular energy and sharing it, from a place of openness, and like I'm really coming at this from, I feel like everyone in the world needs to be able to access this energy so because it's theirs, it belongs to all of us. So it's been really interesting. I live in a region of the United States that is historically pretty rigid in its ways of thought. I live in like the deep South, I guess you should say, so like South Carolina. And there's really nobody doing work like this where I am. I mean, there's like a small pocket of a spiritual community that different people do different things, but no one's heard of interdance, no one's heard of cap, no one's heard of anything like that where I am. I'm really the only person. So it's incredibly interesting bringing this work to a community of people that they when you talk to them about it, they know they need it, but so many people are super resistant still. So, and it's fun for me because honestly, I feel like I'm the perfect person for that because I've dealt with that type of thing my entire life. Resistance from people, fear, that type of thing. So, kind of helping people walk through and overcome that, to just sit for the first time, just to get people to sit sometimes can be even tricky. But there's been a lot of profound things in sessions, and this week alone I've got like 2 full groups come into my space, so people are like really starting to come and want to share it and show up, and the opportunities that have started to flow have been incredibly interesting. As I posted in the group, I met somebody through work I do as a producer that just got out of rehab for like 90 days. Now she's at a halfway house, and I got her to come to a session Sunday, but she told her director about what I'm doing. And the director was like, well, that sounds great. Can we send everybody? And I was just like, yeah, of course. We'll figure that out. So it's been really I don't know, just interesting the ways things and doors have opened, and also correspond with work I've been doing in the past. You know, I was in a relationship with a girl whose mom is like a medicine woman or a shaman. So that's like their big thing. They work with addicts, PTSD, you know, victims, I don't know what you call it, but like people with PTSD, all that kind of stuff around plant medicine. And that's been like cropping up and like coming in ways. And it's just been interesting to see like our kind of like cross basis and the things that I picked up from working in the medicine world. And I kind of recently I've been getting out of that because I'm just more of a fan of like I like to say plant medicine's like getting shot out of a cannon, and sometimes people really need that giant wake up, but I feel like they need a practice afterwards to integrate in their lives. It's not so jarring and off-putting. You know, you can't do plant medicine every day. I mean, you'd be a total psychopath, right? But I feel like practices like inner dance, or you know, really like inner dance is a big my cornerstone now. It's so much easier to integrate in people's lives because the energy gives you what you need. You know, you can step in more slowly to the process if the energy decides that's what you need. You know, sometimes it can be like getting shot out of a cannon too. But anyway, so that's my share. I could probably talk a lot longer, but I don't want to. You know, I want other people to be able to go and stuff. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind of a journey. My life has changed dramatically since I decided that, you know, I was going to do my best to share this and do it with, you know, my personal integrity and start to understand even more of my like internal structure as a facilitator and, you know, a person that just wants to bring this to people. So it's been beautiful.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Blown away by what Zinzi, Michael, and Matt shared. Wow. Okay, I wanna come in now and then open this space later for additional sharings. Yeah, all those are mind-blowing. Everything is mind-blowing, actually. Just being alive right now at this time, there's so much potency. And like, what do you do with this? There's so much feedback. So yeah, when we find an opening to do something about it, to just like be involved, that's a really good word. Sometimes people say I'm busy, but sometimes maybe you could just say I'm involved. That's like a better word. It could look like it's busy, but it's more like you're participating, you're like in the flow, you're in the process, you're in the game, and you're not overwhelmed. So maybe you can erase the word busy, because it's really gonna get busy. It's gonna be so much happening. So what I want to cover today would be really useful for when it does get involved. You're gonna get involved with a lot of energies, a lot of people, a lot of concepts, and you're noticing there's just so much in inner dance. When it first came into the world, a lot of people were looking at it, it's like, wow, it's so much chaos, and that there's no instructions, there's no frameworks. But as you can see, it's actually the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. And a lot of you probably didn't expect that there would be so much information, where you thought, no, it's like you're gonna help me just go into chaos and be nothing, but actually get access to everything. Because that's in the energy there. So what I want to help you to do is to organize your space, your room. When you deal with people, you're opening up their space. You're holding the space, which is opening the space. You're opening the space inside you. And it's easier sometimes to not just be in words or thoughts, but at some point you're gonna have to find a way to organize things. You ask people to lay down, you do it yourself, and you're gonna see what? Like colors, you're gonna feel sensations. Even if you're not feeling that, if you do this for for a room, people are going to feel something. And there's going to be like a lot of details. There's just going to be so much stuff, because how much is inside anyone, inside you, inside others? How much stuff is, it's like stuffed inside. So when you unstuff, unpack, unravel, untether, you're going to get exposed to a lot. So what you're going to need somehow is a system, you know, because you never know how many people are going to be in your room. Based on what Matt shared, you don't know what that's going to do when you, for example, open up that kind of Pandora's box in the US, how many people are into some kind of drug, you know? So if you do your work well and you know you're situated well, you're going to attract a lot of people. So you don't know how big your room is going to be, you know, the internal room, and then the bigger room is going to get really big. So there is always this possibility of confusion. That's why we're in this together. Because you do want to know what you're doing. You know, at one point you can just keep making things up. But if you don't actually have a system and the thing grows, you will get lost. That's part of the journey. It's good to get lost sometimes, you know, people are too located. So they do need to get lost into, you know, wonderland, into the unknown, which a lot of people are scared of, but you do want to deal with what is knowable. So how do you organize the mess? You know, let's mess things up because it's too ordered, but there needs to be some kind of order that comes out of the chaos. So what I'm going to be sharing with you would be really helpful for facilitating groups, but this would probably be a lot more helpful when you're facilitating one-on-ones. Like people as individuals. Because people are deep, you know, like you're deep. You're like universe deep, you're cosmic deep, you're quantum deep. So is there like a pattern somehow that you can use to not get lost? Let me give you an example. Let's say, okay, we're working with people with trauma, you're working with people with addiction, but let me give you another order of complexity. Let's say you pave the way that you notice you're doing something with the human body where there's healing that's happening, and you build up your confidence so that you're not making too many claims. But let's say you're working with people who have basic level would be, okay, I've got diabetes, I've got hypertension, but what about cancer? Let's say someone approaches you who's got that, and we're dealing with something like stage 4. And you know that time is quite valuable. Like you don't know how much time you have with this person. Whatever the outcome, what do you do with that? So let's say you have 3 or 4 of those alongside all the other ones that are just interested, curious, or open. If you decide to build a practice out of this, then you need some sort of a method or a process, because each time you spend with anyone would be super essential, right? So they would walk into your room, you'd walk into the room, you would have your tools. So you've got your ideas on what you're doing with music, you've got your hardware. But where it gets really intuitive is you bring your notebook with you, because you're going to be listening to a lot of deep stuff. And there's going to be a lot going on where the body is concerned. You're interested, okay, what's up with the body? What do I know about the body? You know, we're talking about the brain, the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. And then there's the other dimensions. What's going on with the emotions here? You know, what do we know about emotions? What's going on in the psychological? What's going on in this person's mind? You can explore any one of those, and somehow they're also interconnected, so that the more you make changes in the body, you know, people would say this, like just like Matt said, okay, this is changing my life. And then you're going to hear other people say, okay, my life is changing. But how is life changing? Does that have something to do with the way you see things? But then do we cancel out the thing with the body, where the body seems to be changing? The brain is changing. So the pattern that you hold would need to incorporate all of those in a way that would interconnect, right? Like you don't want to get interested in one set of dimensionalities that won't interconnect with the other dimensionalities, because of this notion that each day, each moment, each journey with a person would be possibly like everything. Maybe that's all you had with that person, and that did something. So how do you bring that universality into the moment, so that you don't get lost, that you have a mapping and you know where to locate yourself? So inner dance has such a mapping, right? We draw out these waves and these geometries, but there's something actually that's a masculine container in inner dance that has been there for a long time. I would say ever since the beginning, even before I experienced the explosion in my system that brought about this work, which for me has just unfolded to so much. When I saw the pattern, I knew it was important. It came at a really important time, and it almost felt like everything that had ever happened to me since childhood like came together in that pattern. And so I'll be honest that like this pattern is being looked at around the world. People are interested in this pattern. I have it drawn in my chest here. You know what that pattern is. It's called the Key of Seven. It's the seed of life. For me, it's embedded in my system because of my birth. I want to look at that pattern, what it could mean. It probably means something to you. I was born on a particular auspicious day. I was born on July 7, 1976. So that's a lot of that, right? So I was interested in what is that? You know, these two lines, when they come together, they make that number. And so in sacred geometry, we see that they're organizable as 7 circles that come together. It doesn't take that much research to see how many times that number comes up. It comes up in music. There's 7 notes in the scale. There's 7 colors in the rainbow, so it has something to do with sound and image. And then there's 7 days of the week. The balance between alkaline and acid is number 7. You can just keep going on. There's some kind of code happening there. So this is a helpful beginning, because very often people are going to be seeing the colors. And you're going to be treating the colors as if they're random elements in the beginning, if you haven't really situated a system that interprets the colors to be holding vibrations. When you decide to, if and when you decide to bring this into a medical scenario, not just a plant medical scenario, but an actual medical scenario, the colors can still come up. And doctors have been looking into this. So if you're going to doctor people, you might want to perceive what is the code in people's bodies that allows you to translate spirit and energy into matter. because we do live in the body. We do organize in the body. There is a system in the personal body and the species body. You know, so yeah, this exists in the inner dance. When I lived in the island for 2 years, I basically imprinted this symbol like on earth. You know, it took me like a long time. I basically outlined the 7 circles on the ground. It took me months. I used very large rocks. Okay, you know, I took all these rocks and I tried to make sure that they had color. So I'd look for representations that would look violet, indigo. It took me a long time. They were like boulder size, some of them even. And I meditated on this. I planted colored plants on them. And in fact, the inner dance energy came out of my inner and outer space after I completed the symbol. Okay. For those further interested in what this is, this is the seed of life, right? It's the number 7, and when you put the 12 circles around the 6, that's the outer petals, what you have is called the flower or the flower of life. Okay, so when you look at this, this is basically like a calendar system. You have 12 circles around the number 7. There's 7 days of the week, 7 days in the week. There's 12 months in the year. So there is a kind of system that speaks about shifts that takes place through time. And somehow this is embedded in the body. Okay, so this is what could get interesting. This could get embedded in the body. This also has something to do with the way the mind works. So this pattern that mediates color, images, and sound, this is somehow codified in the body and in the mind. And you know, people talk about the 7 chakras having representations, certain organs, endocrine systems. So there would be this long-lasting question: how does this medicalize somehow? Are there medical implications of this? So when you are a person who deals with energy, these would keep coming up. So I'm sharing this with you. Like at the time when this symbol wasn't so big yet in the world, like it was already kind of holding space in inner dance. And when the colors kept coming up in the journey, eventually they spoke again and again. And all the time when blue, orange, red, yellow comes through, they hold a lot of meaning. I don't know if this comes up a lot in your practice, in you know, in your experience or the experience you bring to others, but it will never be absent. The colors would always come up. Let's say you ask 10 people to share like a certain percentage, to say like, oh, I saw this indigo, or people don't normally say indigo, they say purple or violet. I saw like this blue. Very often blue comes up, indigo comes up. Rarely green comes up, rarely orange comes up. It's usually blue, indigo, and then it drops down to the lower colors. So when I deal with cancer patients, especially when I deal in medical scenarios, I have my notebook open. When I listen to their words, I use this as a pattern. I can read people's lives through the rainbow. I can perceive blockages in the colors. I don't need to see the aura. I don't believe in scanning people in that way, because when you literalize the color in that way, it stops to mean something. You need to find out what's the psychology in the color. So when people speak about their lives, without having to be too strict about this, because you will be able to create your own system of interpretation that could interrelate with what could be universalized out there, you need to know what red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet means to you. It means something universally because nature speaks those colors. If a tree wants to speak to you about its fruit that's either ripe or not ripe, it would speak to you through colors. Within the human visual system, we can only see between the infrared and the ultraviolet. We're not able to sense what is beyond that normally. And some human beings are seeing colors that are not within that scaling, so that we are transforming the retina in the eyes, the visual cortex in the brain, that we are perceiving more vibrations that were not visible before. But until that time, we are held within a kind of grid or matrix. So you are allowed to build a system of interpretation as to what these representations mean. And in your practice, when you close your eyes, sometimes the colors may start to come up. Or also, when you start to get magnetized to people's bodies, you will feel drawn to particular body parts. So it would help if you knew enough about the actual body and not just the energy body to be able to work with the colors, right? So one of the useful things about this kind of representation is, okay, because you could always itemize, outline, or list, say how many there are. What values can you assign to what some people relate to? Okay, here's expression, here's love, here's insider wisdom, here's power, here's birthing, here's sustainability, and here's integration. Like say red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. But it actually might be more important to understand the relationality between each color. So rounding them into a kind of circle is really helpful. Blue and indigo. I probably talked about this before, but it is useful to speak clearly in this regard. The reason why the reason why it circulates in this way is to create indigo in the color wheel, you literally combine red and blue. So for example, if you do music, you know how there are octaves in the piano or any musical instrument to you know, this is kind of like an octave dimensionally, where you can go as low or as high as you want. The lower and the higher aspects combined create a middle space. So the color in the middle is violet, and in the color chart you can create violet by combining indigo and white. So that's why violet is in the middle, because the white characteristic, white being the combination of all colors, puts that in the middle. So when you put them in this geometrical representation, what you see is relationality, basically. What you see is that there are contrasting and complementary elements, so that red would be against green, blue would be against orange, and indigo would be against yellow. All right, so color theorists, artists like Vincent van Gogh, Goethe, they understood that the secondary color that does not contain a primary color would be opposing. So green is the secondary color that does not contain red, because green is the combination of blue and yellow, and it doesn't contain red. It contains the two secondary colors of blue and yellow. Indigo contains the secondary colors of blue and red. And so opposing that will be yellow. And then orange is a combination of red and yellow, and orange does not contain blue. So when you look at a lot of color charts or art designs, you actually would see red and green facing each other, contrasting or complementing each other. If you know colors of Christmas, for example, it's red and green. What would be interesting is that energetically, in the chakra system, when you start dealing with energy, you would see the same relationality. Maybe you'd see certain relationships between the primary colors to combine to create the secondary. So that the root chakra or the yellow chakra would interact with each other to help to hold the womb space, or the expression chakra and the power or energy chakra would help to hold the heart space somehow. Or the expression chakra and the root chakra would help to hold the conscious or mental space. But what is more obvious normally is, okay, let's clean this up. Let's say red versus green, blue versus orange. Sorry, I might be confusing if I'm not even outlining what they might represent. Let's just maybe assign some representations for these. So this would be integration. Let's say this is knowledge, insight, or wisdom. This could be, let's just put expression. You could put voice, you could put sharing. And green would be, let's say, love. Let's just put power here. You could put power or energy. Just put power. Orange could be, let's say, birthing, creation. Red would be grounding. It's the sustainability or the root. So what I'm getting at is indigo would be relatable to yellow, blue would be relatable to orange, and red would be relatable to green. And very often when you experience energy mapping, when you go into the psychology of the energy with people, a lot of people who have problems with grounding would have issues with the heart. People have issues with emotions that are normally stored in the orange. They'd have issues with expressing themselves clearly. And people who have problems with feeling disempowered or dislocated, they'd have a hard time accessing their mind. So what takes place is the more you close one, you close the other. The more you open one, so you open the heart chakra. A lot of people would be like, okay, let me just have enough money and have enough grounding, and then I'd open my heart. Actually, the more you open your heart, the more you'd have access to sustainability. People who are feeling really stuck emotionally, if you simply allow them to express their truth, then the orange chakra gets freed up. And a lot of people who have issues with energy in general, like people who feel like I can't do it, having a hard time finding enough energy, when they arrive at insight, just seeing the world in a different way, then they then suddenly feel energized. So when you do draw out the chart, you can call it a chart if you will, these representations are there. So let's say indigo, yellow, green, blue, red, orange. When we deal between inner dance facilitators, we actually speak color. In Maya, in the community here, we speak in color. Like in the past, we talk about, okay, I need to go to the green. Our spaces in Maya are colored, so we call them green, indigo, blue. We know where red is. We know where yellow is, and orange. We map things out in terms of, okay, I need to meet you somewhere in yellow. I'm working out a red issue. that's holding a lot of the need for blue. And when people speak that, they actually know what people mean. They can read even what's inside the colors that's being spoken, so that meetings, agreements, actions can come through depending on what is said. And we're always constructing the spaces according to what the higher or more vibratory representations of the colors could hold. So when you may have found yourself creating a healing space or even an eco-village, the colors could help you design what could be outside that starts from what is inside. So the colors would eventually come into vision statements, so that you wouldn't oversimplify things to be areas in the body when you're, let's say, dealing with someone with cancer or depression, or sorry, this is kind of messy. Put this there. The statements people speak identify or reveal what's hiding in their bodies. The statements that they speak are usually either coming from a sense of lack, what is not enough, what do they not have within them or around them that they're seeking for, that's motivating them, that's creating avoidances. And you can start to notice, if you have a system, what could be abundant, what do they have enough of, and usually when people walk into your space, there's usually insufficiency or lack. So already that could simplify into a kind of system. So if people are saying, okay, they could be using a lot of words, but if what they're saying is no one loves me, I'm not getting support, or I'm not able to speak my truth. There's a lack of expression, there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of belongingness, or someone's essentially saying, while using a lot of words, I'm confused. I don't already have the wisdom inside me. Or let's say someone's saying, okay, I feel like I don't have the energy, I don't have the power, I'm weak, or I don't have the freedom, or I'm stuck, or I'm poor. I'm basically not having access to resources. If you're able to map out the interrelationships between all of these, knowing that one blocks another, then you may have a way of listening or speaking to the person that allows for the unstuckening. No, that's not a word. The unstucking, the unsticking, the unraveling of what would be bound up. So people would be bringing up possibly personal experiences, could be childhood experiences, and because your time is valuable and what you're interested in is not just the verbal space. If you want to bring them into energy space, you can do a reading. It could be as quick as 10 minutes. You ask basic questions. What do you want to work on? Tell me about yourself. Do you have an intention? Why are you here? Already those basic questions can start to unravel the colors. So if you knew that there were weak points that needed to be strengthened, if you knew certain things needed to be revealed that were difficult to look at, how would you hold something objective enough that would not trigger avoidance, that would not bring people into a cognitive dissonance? How would you do certain things in a way that would help us look at what's not easy to look at? The colors would help you, because if you have a very simple and objective way to see what is stuck, what isn't moving, what are you afraid of, what are you running away from, what is triggering you, if you had an objective way of mapping things out that's not going to push them too much, too quick, too far, this would help you. This would help you in the way you're holding the body. This would help you in the way you're holding the energy field. Maybe this might even influence the way you're holding the music, holding the waves. But definitely it would help to influence the way you would speak, because your language would hold a space. Your language holds meaning. And because you don't want to talk too much, because that would bring them into a headspace, how would you economize or make optimal your language so that you're saying the right thing that creates the opening? And as the opening is there, you would create enough triggers so that they could look at it, the thing that they're hiding. This holds enough necessary complexity, because if you know that you're not just locating one area of stuckness, if you know that there could be foundational stuckness, like the core wound that's that's creating the other dimensions of stuckness. Is it like a core wound that's related to shame, to guilt, to anger, to resentment, that created a cascade of blockages that affected the other colors? How would you sequence the healing so you would work either on what's more manageable in the beginning, and as you go deeper, you keep going into the core or the source of the problem? So for example, if you're dealing with a cancer issue, it could be like pancreatic, breast cancer, a brain tumor. What you're constantly interested as a kind of archaeologist who digs deeper and deeper is what's at the root, what's at the source. The words would be important to keep digging, because if you deal only with energy, you might, especially with addiction, you might end up supporting bypassing, shortcutting, trying to make things easy. Words do hold a function of making explicit or clear what we otherwise would like to hide. Words aren't just words, so don't agree always with people who say that words can't hold the energy. That's not true. Sometimes that's actually a bypass. Words, by its very invention, holds layers of meanings that allow for clarity and visibility. So when you develop your skills in music and holding the energy, eventually you really want to develop your verbal skills, because you don't just want to be open and vast, you also want to be clear. You don't just want to hold a flower or like the sun. You also want to hold a knife. Words will help you do surgery, and especially when you're coming from a retrocausal space, your words would expand through time. What's usually condensed, you can to do surgery means you can dissect. You can look at the parts. You can literally unravel the structure that's bound up, which is a possible definition of the ego. The ego is this thing that thinks it integrates like all of it into the now and the here. But to be able to do surgery, you need to be able to unravel the map that spreads out across time and space, so that people can look at what's being hid, and upon unhiding things, there's a lot of possible transformation in releasing what otherwise can get like calcified or solidified, like in the body. So language, not just music, not just sound, not just getting people to lay down. You want to use those moments either before a journey or after a journey. Let's say we're doing groups and someone says, no, I want to go deeper. I want to have one-on-one time. And you create your own room, you have them there, you will eventually need to find a way to listen to them in the most empathic yet most surgical way, because when they do show up, they will be ready to get cut up by you. When they get on your table, your surgical table, a part of them will be ready because they showed up. So developing your language will be key, and developing a mapping will guide your language, so that when you open your notebook, you don't need to draw the seed of life. It can look messy, they're speaking and you're putting in certain keywords. Okay, that seems important, and it may look messy, but eventually as they speak, you'll be able to make connections. Oh, okay, so it seems like this is rooted there, and like they need to speak to that one. That one seems to be speaking about the source of the illness, the core of a disorder that's needing and unraveling. So that's the mandala at work. It could really, really help you to develop a medical, an energy medical practice. That's a starting point. There's something helpful in psychology, particularly in transactional analysis, that you could also look at. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the life scripts within transactional analysis, but to go over it quickly, I need to look at my notes. I'm always rewriting these down. So there are these injunctions, and then there are these drivers. What are injunctions? Injunctions are restrictions. They're rules, they're boundaries passed on by the things parents spoke to the children. And generally there could be like don't be, or don't exist, or don't be you, or don't be a child, or don't grow up, or don't make it, don't do anything, don't be important, don't belong, don't be close, don't think, don't feel. So this was recorded. It's there. You can look these up. There's about 12. There's 12 injunctions, and you can simplify that within the 7 colors already. Could be don't exist, don't believe, don't think, don't see, don't share, don't speak, don't feel, don't love, don't belong, don't do it, don't make it, don't be free, don't create, and don't have it. So that a permission would be the opposite of an injunction. And if you know how to read the injunction implanted in a person's body, you can simply find a way, either through words or energy, that be who you are. Everything you need, everything is known. You know it from within. Everything you need to know is right there. Speak your truth, and everyone you meet is speaking a truth that is important to you. Be yourself, or you're loved. You are exactly who you're supposed to be, and I appreciate you for being exactly who you are. So these life scripts can easily shift from the level of an injunction into a permission. So maybe that's your role. Maybe that's why you're there, to give them permission what was restricted to them. And you can either speak this before the process, but you could also opt to speak this somehow while the process is happening. In the past, I used to walk around the room and I would just simply silently go near them and say, good, okay, good job. Yeah, yes, you're okay, good. And that used to do everything already. Like, it didn't matter what people were holding, and just go around and say, good, okay. It spoke to the part of them that says, not okay, not good, not allowed, too little, not enough. So you can signal this with or without words. Anytime you give permission to that which was restricted, already changes the life script. So that shame, guilt, regret, grief, all these emotions could transfer into an opening, something open, something loose that used to be bound up and rigid and stuck. So you might need to practice what could be like good timing. Sometimes it's okay to listen, to just be there. And sometimes, even if they're not saying it, because you're developing a system of listening energetically, the thing that they're not saying, the unspoken, is still being spoken to. And you would be surprised at how you will manage to say exactly the right thing in a minimal fashion without saying too much at the exact right time that it needs to be heard. And that could be within the waves. Because if you are holding the waves and when is it going to be going up and when does it drop, when you might design into the process the forgiveness that came after the anger or the joy that came after the sadness. But you don't hurry it. You may not be wanting to overly express in the beginning that you're okay, you're a good person. Sometimes that they need to feel the script, before they come into a kind of resolution or a healing. There needs to be some kind of confrontation. So the 12 stages are kind of important to study, like in that way. So then there would be the counter injunctions. They're called the drivers. What are the drivers? The drivers are messages from parents that are stressors. They're the opposites of restrictions. They're pretty much commanding. Be perfect. You're not perfect yet. Be strong. You're too weak. Try harder because you're not putting enough effort. Please people. Now, for me, this is what I want to talk about. This is the fifth driver. I don't know what your traumas are, but when I was still a student going to school, like this for me was the primary driver. There's usually like a primary driver, and the primary driver. Sorry, I'm not sharing the screen. Am I? Am I sharing the screen? No, I'm not sharing the screen. Sorry. I was not sharing the screen. Now I'm sharing the screen. So for me, this is my primary driver. And a primary driver is usually what shows up when someone is stressed or anxious, when there's stress or anxiety, when there's like a clear, honest, strong trigger mechanism. That means there was a command that was part of the script that was given to you that was forceful, that you had stored, that had traveled from the parent of the parent of the parent of the parent that needs to be opened up. hurry up. I don't know if you got this, but in my generation or in my space, this was what affected me the most. Like you're late, there's not enough time, hurry up. We need to go now. So I would have to wake up really early, and I hated it the most. Like I had to go to school every time we had to go to a family gathering. I think that their generation, our parents' generation, were brought up with this insufficiency of time. There's not enough time. And I'm just bringing it as an instance because when you try to study inner dance, the thing that you give people the most is time. You do give them space, but understanding the nature of the Zeitgeber or the time giver, the biggest gift you give people is the vibration of time, like oldness or alien realms. They become old. The very nature of fear, the mother fear is the fear of dying. And the fear of death is rooted in the illusion that there's not enough time. So a lot of people will show up in the healing process like looking for something, and this is something they won't be able to verbalize, that they're looking for more time, more time to achieve, to actualize, to transcend, to even just breathe, to be themselves, to come into wisdom, to find their highest purpose and to become that. And when you study the autonomic nervous system and the circadian rhythms of which we affect the most, it's all about time. It's about time. So what you're altering is time. When you hear people say, "Okay, my life is changing," what is it doing? It's actually this event in which you're gaining time. Because when you're holding the space, and we had 3 descriptions of that from 3 different people early in this call, what they're describing is something slowing down, something's maybe even stopping so that you can be with it, you can look at it, you can fall in love with it, you can talk to it, that which is always running. What we're affecting is time. So the primary driver for me in many people's bodies, maybe including yours, is time sped up really fast, and you had to grow up too soon, and you didn't have time to develop, to love, to grow well. So you want to slow down time. This is useful. This is super useful when you study the science, the neurology, the biology of inner dance. Because if you're not just transforming a belief structure, the way people think, if you also believe and know that you're changing your body, then you would need a corresponding map to the body, right? Okay, so yeah, you can work out what the colors mean, but these need to translate into a body system. Nonetheless, you can't just be psychological about it. You need to be practical. People live in their bodies, and if you ask them to lay down, you will alter people's bodies. You will change their bodies. You will not just change their minds. So I don't know if you listened to the last Zoom call. There wasn't so much attendance then because it was a Sunday, but I saw that it was fairly watched more than a lot of the other Zooms. When you look at the brain maps in the inner dance, no, I think this is removed. The thing that we affect the most is this part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Maybe it's worth mapping out the importance of this. The hypothalamus coordinates through the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the clock. Okay, say this is the clock. The hypothalamus coordinates time. It coordinates the circadian rhythms. the 24-hour body clock. It coordinates your breath, your breathing function. It coordinates your heartbeat. It coordinates sleep and wake stages. It also coordinates emotion. There's this part of the hypothalamus called the hypothalamus attack area. It's in the ventromedial hypothalamus, and it coordinates emotion, especially fear and aggression. So if you are activating the hypothalamus in all kinds of extreme ways, you also end up triggering like emotion. The hypothalamus coordinates the autonomic nervous system. So it's a really small part of the brain, but it basically affects almost everything that inner dance activates. Brain, breath, blood. Brain would be circadian rhythms does coordinate delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. And the ANS coordinates the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's like there's this clockwork in your body. Oh, I'm still not, my God, I'm still not sharing. Sorry. The image is useful. Sorry about that. I don't know, I'm lagging in terms of that. So this is useful because you understand that when you have this driver that says, okay, you're going to be late, you need to hurry up, then what gets colonized or traumatized is your hypothalamus. When you need to wake up early for school, you're already receiving a Pavlovian conditioning. You're already getting programmed, not just mentally, but your body is getting attacked. It's getting contained. It's getting programmed. It's getting executed. You know, it's receiving the driver. Hurry up. So your thalamus needs to run according to a specific clock. So maybe you live in a certain part of the world where collectively people can't really relax because you have winters, you have seasons, and you need to store food when it gets cold, and you need to your hypothalamus would be easily programmable by the external world. And even if you try, or let's say people in general, even if people try to own up, to take responsibility over their own bodies, if you live in that part of the world that's regulated by the clock, you know, it's always looking at the watch and, okay, am I late? I need to, and, you know, I don't have enough time. There's an insufficiency of time. Just you doing the inner dance, the reason why you're holding this energy is to shift people's clocks, because the clock determines everything. Really, I mean, when you say, okay, my life is changing, let's say people say that's what they partially mean if the change is happening within an inner dance wave or structure. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call the energy. It doesn't need to be called inner dance. But if you are affecting the sense of time, and physically, if you're affecting the hypothalamus, it means that life is changing dimensionally, where suddenly people have more access to resources, love, belongingness, insight, because if they had more time, if they weren't in a hurry, if something's slowing down and they realize that I can do something now, I don't need to be anxious, you're rewiring their sense of time. So it does help to understand that the clockwork is centralized in a particular part of your body. You literally have circadian neurons. You have neurons in your brain that facilitates rhythmicity. Like there's a rhythm that's programmed inside you. And the things that you're studying now, the things that we do, these are designed to alter the clockwork. You know, these are statements, but we speak many statements. We reveal many layers that lead up to that speak insight, that what you're giving as a gift is time. What you're altering in people's lives is time perception, the sense of time. What you're expanding in the body is time and space. Because you know what a lot of this basically mean now, it helps you coordinate the work. You can see the cascade of fear. Okay, it's a lot of it's actually bound up by this lack, that they're not enough because they don't think they have enough resources, because there's not enough time. You know, like the metaphor, time is money. Money was invented and evolved in a way that actually comes from the blueprint of time itself. The money system is designed according to how we understand time. Money directly is a manifestation of how our brain is wired into time. It helps us to facilitate time. It creates value exchanges in accordance to how we evolved into three-dimensional time. So now when we're shifting into digital time, into fourth-dimensional time, valuation transactions are shifting. Now it's not so much just the money system or the literacy system, it's now the internet system that's allowing us to hold more information, more value, more activity. And in our brain, the hypothalamus is changing the way we are expressing, sending out, or inhibiting neurotransmitters or hormones. A lot of that is shifting, and that's actually what I would like to talk about today. This is something I haven't mapped out publicly, so I'll be bringing up possible mappings to address, okay, how do you organize the physicality now that you have a way to conduct the colors that manages belief structures, reading what is stuck emotionally, psychologically. How do you physicalize that? Okay, I'm making sure I press the share button this time. So you have the chakra system, and you really have to understand that even though a lot of people say that the chakra system comes from the East, the seven-based chakra system is actually a product of the West. It was authors like Sir John Woodruff and C.W. Leadbetter. They were Western writers studying Tantra, studying yoga, that held on to a more rigid structure, which in the East and the Orient was confused. Sometimes they would use the number 5, the number 12, the number 8, the number 6, the number 7. The thing became rigid when it was written by the Theosophists, by other writers. You call them Orientalists, the first Westerners that became interested in Oriental thought. So when you study the chakra system, don't need to feel that this is super old. The super old was not really stabilized yet into the key of 7. So the key of 7 is a meeting point between the East and the West. And that opens up interpretation. Don't just study the seemingly Sanskrit thinking that it was there as a stationary and static element that already kind of should rock your mind and body. It's trustable enough because nature does speak the number 7 in sound and color. So no matter where you're coming from in the world, this is something we can co-own. But do enough research so that when you take up these old ancient terminologies that people like to use now, understand the chronology and the etymology and where and when these things became objectified, you know, even colonized, if you will. So that's where science can help, because there's a lot in the, like in the mystical, the Oriental, that holds subjectivity. There's a lot in the scientific method that could be useful in listening to feedback that would be universal enough. You know, we could shift science so that it's not so empirical, but the ability to listen to feedback, to do peer-to-peer conversations, so that when you make a knowledge claim, when you say something is true, that could shift from one religion and one belief system to the next. There is something about the Western tradition that allows for slow evolutionary feedback process that could lend to people interested in energy. So when you study the mind and when you study the energy, corresponding would be your study of the body and the material and the physical that has feedback mechanisms that's both static and changing. So going back to the system then, there is some wisdom to not just looking at these as colors. You also read about the endocrine system possibly creating matches, and endocrine system, which would be the glands that excrete fluids and chemicals inside. Okay, I wasn't sharing again. Sorry, that's not worth sharing anyway. So when we talk about the brain, we talk a lot about circuitry, that we can manage who we are and who we're becoming through the way synapses, neurons start to go into neuroplastic connectivity so that you can experience more connections. That's electricity and magnetism at work. But if you want to ground more into how that information is sustained in the body, then not just circuitry, but chemistry. How are you combining chemicals that alter your mood, your thought patterns, your behavior, so that outside of the energy process and also inside, you cannot escape the fact that your complexity is chemical in nature. So not only are you altering circuits, you're also altering chemicals. So when you start to study addiction, when you start to study motivation, what drives people, what keeps them like in a loop, in an echo or a repetition, so that they keep repeating the same thoughts, they keep doing the same thing, they keep saying the same words. If you are interested in how transformation works, then you could be open to new ways of holding the chemistry. So there was, for example, like a question posed on the group, the WhatsApp group today on sexuality, like sexual trauma. How would the playlist be conducted? Would be more cholinergic, adrenergic? Would it be more sympathetic, parasympathetic? Matt had this interesting question about, okay, if you're dealing with addicts, how would you determine what would be the right playlist if you didn't know the chemistries that would be in people's bodies? You know, the simpler reading would be, okay, what kind of drug are they taking? But maybe you could actually go deeper. So what I'm interested in is the endocrine system could be similarly, wait, let me just get rid of this. Could also be mapped out. Okay, what are the endocrine participants? What the hypothalamus is an endocrine gland. So we've spoken about that. The pituitary gland is also an endocrine gland. You hear a lot in spiritual circles about the pineal gland. And then, okay, what's the throat version? It's the thyroid. And then you have, in the heart chakra, what do you have? You have the thymus gland. And then in the yellow, you would have the adrenaline, the adrenal cortex, the adrenaline gland. And then in the orange, you would have the gonadal gland, which should be the ovaries or the testicles. Okay, so all of these, interestingly, emit or secrete chemicals. The pineal, for example, secretes melatonin that puts you into the dream state. It can also partially release serotonin. Serotonin is expressed in many different parts. The thyroid is a little bit more sciencey. Thyroxine, I don't want to go into that so much. Let's go into that later. Epinephrine and norepinephrine would be from the adrenal gland. Testosterone, androgens would come from the ovaries or from the testicles. And then the hypothalamus has like a whole bunch of circadian rhythm elements to it that would be mappable. So this looks kind of complex. We would need to borrow certain insights and principles within the mandala or the seed of life to help us see how more easily understood the endocrine system is through connections. Which is to say, okay, it's only so interesting to look at blue without orange, or indigo without yellow, or green without red, or even orange without red and yellow, or green without blue and yellow that creates green, or indigo without red and blue. So what's easy, at least to understand within the endocrine system, is that they're organized within what are called axes. There's the hypothalamic pituitary axis, there's a hypothalamic pituitary thyroidal axis, and then there's hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which is to say the hypothalamus manages the thyroid. The hypothalamus, as an endocrine gland, manages the other endocrine system called the adrenal cortex. And then the hypothalamus and the pituitary organizes the sex organs, the testicles and the ovaries. So it's not so complicated when you know that there is a centralizing body, and just asking people to lay down, putting on the playlist coordinates transformations in all of those. So were we to come up maybe with a more at ease representation of what this could look like as a mandala, would be, okay, I wrote down possibilities here. These are by no means set. Let's say here's red. Now let's just put the letter orange, yellow, green. That looks like a 6. Blue, indigo. What could be the representation? So let's say orange would be obviously the reproductive system. Let's say reproduction. Let's put digestion in red. The endocrine gland that I didn't mention was the pancreas. So you can map out the pancreas to be operating there. Sorry, let's not put adrenal. Let's put let's say addiction, or more fairly, let's put motivation, that which drives people. And then I'll explain why, but let's put healing in the green, and in the blue, based on what the thyroid does, let's put growth. And in the indigo, let's put intelligence to go with the letter I. All right. So why or how did we come up with these? I think we would need to assign endocrine glands here. So here we mentioned like the gonads, which is the ovaries and the testicles. Here is where you put the adrenal system. And then here is where you put the thymus gland. And then the thyroid gland. And then here, maybe let's put the pineal gland. And then the pancreas would be here, that which converts food into energy. And then here you would have both the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. The crown chakra is normally assigned to the pituitary gland, which is responsible for executive function, meaning the pituitary gland is normally seen to be that which manages all the other glands. Okay, so what do they do is the question. Starting with the yellow, which is what we most often think about or talk about. Let's say in the energy process, inner dance, kundalini, when people press on the solar plexus, on the abdomen, a lot of facilitators like to press on the yellow system, the yellow chakra. What are they activating? So to describe what happens in the endocrine system, the HPA axis is responsible for a lot of what goes on here. So the hypothalamus would release these chemicals. It's called the corticotropin releasing hormone. And then the pituitary gland would be activated, would release adrenocorticotropic hormone. And then that would activate then the adrenal cortex, releasing epinephrine, which is known as well as adrenaline. You know, it wakes you up, it startles you, you go into fight or flight, you know, you fight, you run away, you freeze. And then cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So when people press on this, there's a lot of energy because you know what adrenaline or epinephrine does. You know what cortisol does. So you raise a lot of energy when you hit that. It's really useful and amazing to see what power does when that comes up. But when there's too much cortisol, when there's too much of the stress hormone in the system, if that's all people want to do, you know, just to make power rise up, understanding what comes up in the HPA axis, why would that be the only center? Why would that be the only powerhouse? If you actually expend and release too much cortisol into the bloodstream, then people have a hard time sleeping, then their heart rate goes up, they become overreactive, they become oversensitive, you raise possible aggression levels inside. So the good news is when you mix cortisol with serotonin, with dopamine, with other neurotransmitters that sent out from the thyroid, from the thymus, you actually then bring healing, joy, happiness. It really just is important to understand how balance comes, you know, how does it settle? So that if you're not just trying to release adrenaline or epinephrine or cortisol to release power and activate, then there could be that balance happening. So that's where the physical understanding could help the indigo or conscious, you know, belief structure understanding. Let's look more into this. So the thyroid is interesting. The thyroid is responsible for growth and partially intelligence as well, differentiation. It's also partially responsible for reproduction. So you have these hormones called thyrotropin, prolactin, thyroxine. Prolactin is interesting. That's that is the chemical that's secreted when women are producing milk in their breasts and when they're feeding children. So it has something to do with nurturing. I do believe there's prolactin in men as well. So when you want to bring sense of empathy, and so when people have hypo or hyperthyroidism, which is getting really, really common, there's a lot of imbalance and there's a lot of emotional disturbance that takes place. So we need to watch out that when people are dealing with release, with a lot of activation that happens in the neck, you want to be aware of how sensitive that area is. Very often, this opens up, it stretches out, and then people scream, people cry, people puke out liquids. There's a lot of emotion, like trapped in that. But on a chemical level, there's a lot of adjustments that need to take place, even as the other endocrine systems are finding homeostasis. So similar to the adrenal cortex, the thyroid is controlled by the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So just asking people to lay down and exposing them to certain waves, holding them in certain ways, will already affect the thyroid healing process. Okay, so going back to the screen, the thymus is extremely interesting. The thymus is located very near the heart. And the thymus is more interlinked, not with the pituitary, it's linked with the pineal system. What is the thymus for? What is its main function? Why would you want to go to the heart? Or what is underneath the heart? Not just the heart. When you touch the chest, you're not just holding the heart, you're affecting the thymus system. Now, the thymus gland is responsible for immunity. It's responsible for autoimmunity. So when people are less resistant to disease, to infection, to viruses, it means that the thymus gland is not so strong. Now, what's interesting about the thymus is after puberty, after a certain age, it starts to shrink. It's called the thymus involution. So it's really useful to look at the thymus or the green chakra endocrine system in relation to the whole map. Because when puberty comes, sexual energy rises, and for some reason or other, that which is responsible for healing goes down. Okay, so when people start to exhibit more sexual energy, that's actually when we start getting old. we get older, we age, we're not able to handle sickness as much, and there's like an involution already naturally in place. So it's good to have healthy sexual energy, but too much, and you will activate a lot of sexual energy in the energy process. So this is something you want to balance out. When there's too much androgen and testosterone, there's actually also a heightening or an increase in adrenal energy, meaning adrenaline, adrenaline and dopamine. So addiction, obviously, is interrelated with sexuality. So there's thing about motivation, wanting, needing, that heightens and spikes up. And that actually closes the thymus gland in the long term, meaning people just get old, they get weak. But if they feel powerful in the moment of wanting, needing, trying to have, it could be a momentary sense of power. But in the long term, people who get operations whose reproductive organs are not getting activated so much, the thymus actually grows bigger. So it's a strange thing that the thymus and the gonads are in competition with each other. This is something you want to study, that if you want to activate the orange sexual energy, you also want to activate the heart system in a way that they're not going into competition with each other. And how they often go into competition is by sending out these chemicals, these neurotransmitters, like the hormones, like testosterone, androgens, that are really good at allowing for reproduction. I mean, that's their first function anyhow. For women, androgens are sent out at that particular time of the month when there needs to be ovulation. And when ovulation isn't happening, androgens go down. So when women kind of lose the rhythmicity of that system, all kinds of problems start to arise. So again, because the hypothalamic pituitary system activates the gonadal system, just getting people to lay down and exposing them to the waves could bring alterations and balance to the reproductive system. So you can see how inner dance assists in so many different problem areas in one activity. Just getting people to lay down already assists them in terms of issues with growth, with immunity, with development, with aging, with reproduction. So going back to the orange, one of the most interesting chemicals that is exhibited or expressed in inner dance is oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is something people associate with empathy, love, belongingness, right? It's like the love hormone. So when your oxytocin levels go high, then you feel connected with people. Now, what's interesting about oxytocin in current research is that we're finding out that oxytocin doesn't just bring about love and belongingness, it actually brings about anxiety and fear. And this shows up differently in men and women. It has something to do with memory. Like when people experience, so this would look at the question posted in the group around sexual trauma. Oxytocin could be implicated and be made responsible for holding memories of bad experiences that is within a social dimension, social strata, social system. So when you experience something traumatizing that had to do within a social process, oxytocin helps to hold that memory. So if you design your music, you design your healing system, when you start to hold the waves, if you are constantly trying to bring people into emotive or emotional states, trying to get them to embrace each other and to love each other, there could be an overexpression of oxytocin in a way that latches on to cortisol, latches on to the adrenal system and even dopamine, that leads to avoidance patterns, that leads to attachment issues, that leads to anxiety, that leads to fear responses. So you then want to study how to balance out high oxytocin events with detachment, with the ability as well to not create modes of latching, or if there's closeness, there needs to also be a kind of distance. So in terms of the sleep stages, a lot of these neurotransmitters like oxytocin and serotonin, they actually start to decrease when we near REM state. And the function for that is like the less attached we are to certain ideas and people and so on and so forth, then the more we can see or interconnect with the things that are hard to see when we're too involved with just one particular person or one particular topic or one particular place or event. So oxytocin seems to hold some kind of role in allowing for empathy, for feeling other people, which also means absorbing other people's energies. So when you then look at the sexual process, a lot of experiences in inner dance where people experience sexuality, but very often when that experience comes, it's sex with oneself. I'm not talking about masturbation. I'm talking about becoming one with the self. And you literally would see these movements in the body where they experience the contraction. The contractions in the mother who's giving birth is caused by oxytocin. So oxytocin does lead to contraction, but there's also this distance element in inner dance that's not coming from attachment. There could be acetylcholine, there could be serotonin, there could be like a lot of these other hormones that are hard to pronounce. When you create like a relaxed yet vibrant mix, not only are you getting contractions, you're getting the expansions at the same time. There's a kind of self-birthing that takes place in the inner dance. And the difference between a self-birthing and a birthing of others, maybe physiologically, energetically, is when one is becoming one with oneself, is not needing, not wanting another, not wanting something from the outside that would complete the one. There still is possible functionality of these chemicals that allows for an integration. If people aren't wanting and needing something from the outside, but are actually having and are simply coming from being, then there could be a possible rewiring or rechemicalizing of these hormones and neurotransmitters that bring about a deep balance that is very rarely experienced in the human body. So this is interesting to watch or to know about, that were you to study these chemicals, you don't want to study them one at a time. You want to study them somehow together. Okay, what else is there? I think in the hypothalamus, once again, there's a chemical. There's so many chemicals that come out of the hypothalamus, and one of them would be vasopressin. I think that is pretty much implicated in the mirror neuron system. So when, again, I keep repeating myself, just asking someone to lay down and closing their eyes and you introducing the waves, the ability to think through fractals, through dimensions, through layers, requires that you build a structure that allows you to put multiple parts into containers that hold the whole that would be part of different parts. You need a mirror system in order to be able to do that. You need a way of holding out the mirror, so once you see a person, once you look at a place or word, you know who you are in relation to the thing that you're looking at. And then the more you're able to hold complex ground to organize this whole library where, okay, I know where to put that word, that concept. I'm not just, being directed by the outside world that, okay, this word means that meaning. When you take it upon yourself to organize your own room, just merely asking someone to lay down, closing the eyes, when you release a chemical like vasopressin, which is very much like oxytocin, this is what's interesting. You allow for the building of empathy and mirroring. That basically human beings are the part of the earth that's able to look at the mirror and to be able to look at itself. We're not superior, we're not greater, we're simply the eye of the earth that's able to look back at itself. And the way we're able to do that is through the mirror system, the mirror neuron, the system that is able to empathize. To love means I know how you feel. I feel like I could understand what's happening inside you. Okay, this is not so well developed in other species. So what is partially and hugely responsible for that is the inner dance area of the brain called the hypothalamus. So balancing vasopressin and oxytocin helps you to hold your mirroring process, so that when you feel like, okay, I have a deeper understanding of what's going on inside other people, it's actually one of the gains and benefits of this work that we're doing. So that's what it means to assist or to alter the clockworks inside of us. Expanding time perception. The sense of time means the ability to live across yesterday and tomorrow and here and there. That's able to empathize not just with your mom, with your partner, with your son or daughter, with your pet, but also with like cascading more connections that spreads out through all directions. This is what's happening now. So when you alter the hypothalamus, when you alter the pituitary system, when you alter the HPA axis, the HPT, the HPG axis, the thyroid, gonad, adrenal system, when you balance out all these colors, basically, you're creating this mirroring system that allows you to see farther across all these layers and dimensions, that's containing more and more layers and dimensions, without you having to totally understand this in the beginning. I'm just explaining to you what you might have been conducting for yourself as you go into this work. Your mind and body and brain are changing in accordance to these. So these balancing is automatic because you've been doing it. It's already been happening. It's just being worded out. So this is it. I'm offering you a possible schooling system, allowing you to study the mind and the body continuously, lifelong. You could get interested in what you are, what is being altered. We can talk about these more and more, but you would really get to understand this by practicing, by not, yeah, it's interesting. You can practice this by closing your eyes, but we can't literalize closing or opening the eyes when we say do it with your eyes open, I'm not talking about your actual eyes per se, but to understand at least what you're doing, even that as you open up for events to happen that you don't know about, to open up the space where you can know what you do not know, and you don't have to know what you already do know from an intuitive deep space. Deciding that you deserve to understand what makes you up, and that you deserve to bring an integrative healing process to others that doesn't just transform individuals, but transforms human beings in general. A lot of the combinations of chemicals that are arising in people's bodies are new. So even if your studies in some of these chemistries might be new, what would be interesting is that because the combinations will not be combinations we've experienced so much before. Like evolution is at work now. Psychotropic mechanisms, that's what it's called. It's not just talking about plant medicine in general. The sympathetic and parasympathetic, and then there's actually a third autonomic nervous system. It's called the enteric nervous system. It's the digestive nervous system. The sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous systems are being rewired so acceleratedly now, so that it bears to be, be made curious over. I'm going to keep asking these questions through these Zoom calls to invite you. What exactly is changing? What exactly are you altering? So when people say my life is changing, what does that mean? When you ask someone to lay down and you pump it up, you rock the boat, you splash things all over, you splatter, you scatter, you open things up, you trigger. What are you doing? When someone says, okay, there's a transformation happening, like what exactly do you mean? So do we make things up, or do we put some kind of organization? So what I shared with you is a possible pattern. It's embedded, it's imprinted across nature. It's called the number 7. Keep drawing it, keep doodling it, put it in your notes. Sometimes be interested in the mind, sometimes be interested in the body. Learn to ask interesting questions. When you wake up, you will have interesting questions, and maybe that would help you to explore the Wikipedia of the global mind. And the next thing you know, you're starting to notice, okay, this is my expertise. This is maybe what I'm interested in more than other elements. So that later I'll be interested in other elements, but right now this is my core, because it's healing my own core wound, which allows me to understand the core wounds of others. And then I will start to notice the other core wounds. And then a global regeneration starts to happen. So take it slow, take it like part per part. Don't hurry things. If you feel like, okay, this is a load, what you need to hold in the beginning is a systematicity, because if you have the knowledge of how the whole integrates some of the parts, the general parts, it actually helps you to absorb a lot of the parts that might have been way too much in the past. If you have at least an effective integrative container that's consistent, you can actually absorb a lot, because you know where to slot it into your own head space, your own brain and your body. Because unless it's relevant in your work, you won't be interested. But if you see the whole practicality, the relevance, then you'd actually realize that I need this because I'm affecting people. If I'm affecting people, I want to understand how I'm affecting people, rather than just to affect for the sake of affecting, because some things will bring to balance, some things will just shake things up. Okay, so I'm interested in questions, in ideas, in going back to how we started in terms of the colors, the belief structures. Do you see how certain elements could be useful? How could this help you in some ways, you know? As well as maybe some questions that rise up. I'm also interested in how you might have resonated with some of these. Okay, so just sound out if you'd like. I'll just mute now.
Hi, Pi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm curious. I need to understand the brainwaves better so that I can understand how to create playlists and blend. But I'm curious if certain brainwaves stimulate or downregulate specific chemicals.
Yes. Okay, very good, super good question, because this helps us tie in a lot of the earlier conversations with the present one. So, okay, I liked your question posted earlier about adrenalizing people when there might actually be traumas there that we might be like looping or repeating. One of the first early mistakes that facilitators do when they go overexcited is they try to do too much. Usually when we leave people alone, the interventions are happening internally. So when people want to go into a healing process, when they're trying too hard, a lot of the motivations is actually coming from low self-esteem. When they are into people pleasing, and especially when there's market forces at work, when they're commercialized too early, and then when they do financial exchange, they want to put themselves out there, and they end up putting too much of themselves. Partially the need to the low self-esteem usually shows up as needing a lot of feedback. So they want to see something happening in the body because people paid, or whether it be even their mom or their sister, they want something to happen because of the low self-esteem thing. So when they press in the body too much to try to elicit a reaction, what they end up doing is exactly to go into adrenergic, like adrenaline pumping situations. So their choice in music and their methods in creating a lot of noise, like, even I used to do that when I was still coming from as well my insecurities. I think we just need to be confident. And so there will be an alteration in the choice of music or sounds, vibrations, also in the way people touch bodies when they are coming more from more confidence, more knowledge. So yeah, to talk about the brain waves needs to match to talk about the music choices. Like what would be the rhythms that you would emanate if you were holding something more in depth. So basic principle, rhythm organizes time. And when people are trying to adrenalize the body, they choose a certain rhythmicity. And a lot of that would seem almost like clubby, the things that you would see in a club. That's it's got the drum beat, it's got the pulse. So if you are coming from care and you want to take your time, there's nothing wrong with adrenalizing people in certain stages. I tend to be a lot more careful. I don't like adrenalizing people for the sake of it. So when you choose music, either in sequence or in layers, you would want deeper elements. And then when you create a layer that would be safer, but also like activate, vitalize, revitalize if something has been like repressed or inhibited. Go for faster waves that are unrecognizable. They don't trigger the heartbeat in the same way. And then you want to layer that so it's a lot softer, so you're not getting too much of the mechanisms that's too cathartic. It could be in the experimentations that you could bring in some of the more enervating or adrenalizing situations, but coming from someone like you would maybe lessen that. So you actually have so much control in terms of response mechanisms through music that affect the brainwaves. So your question is coming from a spot on space, I think. It still has to do with ways of combining these different brainwave elements. So the last one that I posted, the REM sleep entrainment playlist, go study that one, because that one has been gaining a lot of good feedback. I designed it for sleep, but a lot of people have been using it just for the heck of it. And they're saying it's not, people who had severe anxiety with other playlists, they're saying it's not triggering them. It's actually bringing them into amazing spaces. So if you can replicate that using either the Noise app, or when you start using programs that allow you to layer music of your own, when you make choices, one song at a time doesn't usually work. You want to layer 2 or 3 songs together. So you're holding, a trance defined means you're holding something very slow, very relaxing, very, opening, but you still need your trigger. You need your trigger. You can't do without your trigger. Otherwise, you're just putting them to sleep. So it really is up to you how much trigger you want to hold and how you want to hide or make that present. A lot of it will depend on your audience. There are audiences and participants that are very liberal and are very open and are experimenting. So go ahead and let them explore their sexuality, their amazingness. But there are people who are just hurt and oversensitive. So you need to empathize and design your system so that you can't generalize things. You need to know like who is who, and like in the room, and where are they now. Yeah, I hope this helps.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Pai. It's something that really stood out for me, and in your last talk, and I suppose your new playlist, is something about the unrecognizable sounds, how that, I like the word you used, how that dislocates us. It confuses, but in a gentler way, and I'd really like to play with that. And I have a sense of that if I'm looking for sounds that trigger or fire up the body, that I'm layering it with more, say, the water elements, for example, so that I'm balancing the elements in the sounds as well. So that, I just have a feeling about that. I'm going to play around with that.
I want to speak to your question a little bit more that you posted in the group. In regards to sexual dimensions, sexual trauma, sexual activation, there's something interesting about testosterone. When testosterone levels rise up, which is in men, and estrogen in women, oxytocin levels actually go down. I think this is interesting, that when people are allowed to go too much into sexual energy, the level of empathy and genuine love goes down. So I think there's something interesting in your question that should allow people to experience healthy sexuality, but at the same time doesn't shut down this ability to love and to empathize. But naturally, every time testosterone levels go up, in men, especially. So in women, when estrogen levels go up, especially mothers, I think they go into anxiety. There's a lot of mothers that when they go into motherhood, they actually become more anxious. So oxytocin was important in the birthing process or in the lactating process. They gain nurturing, but their oxytocin levels actually go down when they care too much about motherhood in the very human way. So I think there's so much to explore in terms of getting people to not get attached. So too much sexuality, I'm saying, becomes an actual manifestation we're seeing a lot because of the testosterone levels in men who haven't really found themselves and are not getting in touch with, so they overly express it outwards without really internalizing. So your question in brainwaves and where you're coming from is really useful to maybe plan out or strategize how long should it be this internalization before people are maybe pushed to externalize too fast. Because there are a lot of facilitators because of this low self-esteem thing and overexcitement. A lot of them because they're doing entry-level stuff, workshops where they don't know if they're going to see the others again. Then they try to put too much in. And if some of these first experiences don't go in depth, they just go into, okay, oh, that excited me. Oh, I'm going to want more. The addiction, the dopaminergic cycle would hit too early, and then they keep wanting and wanting and wanting. So actually bringing people into deep, like almost non-REM, they just go deep. This is what people also could be needing. I'm not so sure. I can see what people are excited over. But I do know a lot of the older facilitators in the world are interested more in this in-depth element. So just to answer your question, there's something about sexual chemicals that when you leave it to its own devices, when epinephrine, dopamine mixes with testosterone, that just, when people have orgasms, then you express those, but after an orgasm, then what? Men after orgasms, they really just detach. Women, they're very different. They feel the oxytocin lasting a lot longer. So like there needs to be maybe more. We need to spread out the process. We can't just give them these one-off, one-shot elements. There needs to be a lot more space. I don't know how this would be useful for everyone, but I feel like to your question, there's something really deep about what you're asking. People are wanting too much because they're coming from low self-esteem. And when you give them too much power, a lot of the most powerful people in the world are actually coming from low self-esteem. They're really good at doing things. They have such a powerful yellow chakra because they have low blue or green elements. So yeah, like there should be all of it. Like all these ingredients, all these brain states, all these experiences need to be varied for people. Thank you. Okay, Natalie, you raise your hand.
Hello. Just I see in YouTube a lot of for example, I say like 436 for the red chakra, 570 for hertz for blue, and I wonder if this kind of sounds or waves we can use it for this that you are explaining, and if it's true or if it's something that we can rely on this like it has a lot of logic what you say, like some people maybe has like this kind of problems and you are noticed like is the heart is green and I don't know, like, and sometimes you have in YouTube like 600 Ds is to work on the heart. I don't know if you can say something about that, or if we can guide from this, or we can use this kind of sound, because sometimes we don't know if it's true, or if we can study from someplace these kind of things.
Yeah,
That's
it's a good question. It's also one of the most common questions, the one you bring up now, Natalie. I don't subscribe to isolating frequencies because I feel they're subjective. You change the dimension you're looking at anything, it will look different. So what inner dance does differently from other modalities that isolate frequencies and elements is let me draw this out because it's easier to be more visual about this. Let's add another screen. Let's say without having to name things, let's say have the slower and the faster and then the more erratic waves, and then the slowest waves become tiny so that they start to look like this. Let's say this could be delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. When people isolate, say, okay, theta is the best because it has this particular effect, or is it alpha waves, somewhere in between? When you try to measure, when you try to create an accounting of this, it is very reductive in my experience. What I perceive that brings about change isn't actually to look at this one alone or this one alone. The actual energy is pretty much this becoming this, and then this becoming this, or it could be this becoming this, or this becoming this. And when you oversimplify, you think, okay, you know, it looks like this way, but it's not. There are ranges. So this would be 0.5 to 4 hertz, and then this would be 4 to 7, and 7 to 12, 12.5 to 30, and 30 and beyond. So it's not one particular hertz level. It's a whole range. Like this is like a whole range, you know, like so it's everything in between. It's everything in between that. What I'm trying to say here is that the actual change that I've been seeing over the years is when you move from one frequency to the next. And usually the most change happens when you make a big movement from let's say delta to gamma. You know, it's based on your style. How do you move things from slow, relaxing, opening to triggering, to fast? And then how do you move it back to slow, open? It's actually in the law of contrast or the law of opposites where change happens, because already a big part of the trauma and the dualism in the human experience is we make decisions too fast and too hugely. We get stuck with, okay, this is more spiritual and that's not spiritual. I like this and this one isn't so good. So when the brain is trained to make preferences, that's how duality sets in. That's how judgment sets in. So what we're learning, what we're experiencing, and what we're teaching, sharing with other people is when people don't make decisions too fast, when people are exposed to as many varieties as possible, what takes place is an ecological diversity, a biodiversity, a neurodiversity. I think what's wrong with humans is we've lost diversity. So you could see what the human mind tries to do. It's like it tries to localize, it tries to define, saying, okay, this is a better frequency. That's the best frequency. I think that's a really human thing to do. I don't think animals would want to do that. I don't think the cosmos would say that's the best, because there's infinity. So why would you localize on like a particular hertz level? I think what's interesting is when certain physicists were studying the, like we're talking about electricity and magnetism, What's interesting is previously the average electricity in the earth was oscillating between 6 to 7 hertz. And then and what happened was they noticed that this was going up to somewhere between 12 to 13 hertz. So it means that there's relativity there. So that the way we, oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing. There's relativity there. It means that the way we were perceiving the grid or the matrix what was in this range before, but we seem to be moving into another range. And at the same time, what is being perceived as the magnetism in the earth is also being reduced. And every time you see electricity rising, magnetism falling, that's when change happens. So what I'm trying to say is the way we perceive hertz today won't be the same as tomorrow. So who is to say that what is the strongest hertz frequency now is? So I've never been attracted, to be honest with you, I've never been attracted to reductive, oversimplistic, because I've read the literature, and when I see the things people use to substantiate their knowledge claim, it seems too subjective, and they haven't really, like, yeah, it's almost coming with this activism where there's something wrong with the other frequencies. I think there's something wrong when we say that's more spiritual and the other is not spiritual. Because God and the goddess is in everything. And I think how you heal is say, no, God is inside that frequency too. How would you say that's the frequency of God? That means that all the other frequencies are not God. Then that's very judgmental. If you think about it, right? How could we develop like a body and a brain in a way of listening where we hear everything? It's like, yeah, that's God too. And then that would allow that to manifest. What if all vibrations were actually like perfect, like in a way, you know, it sounds so illogical, but in a bigger logic, it sounds even more logical. We don't want to get stuck. I think we would get stuck with, no, I'm measuring that frequency. It's not divine. I don't like you. You're bad. It's a dangerous thought when you think about it. Sometimes actually the things that look the least spiritual might be hiding the most spirit, and a lot of people are suffering because of that. We need a new system that's not dualistic in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's an interesting thought. Yeah, so yeah, use everything in inner dance, in your process. I think explore all the combinations. It's the movement from one to the other that brings about change. Okay, anyone else would have any thoughts or feelings or questions or ideas?
I do, Pi.
Hey, Paula.
Hi. You told us that when we're going to do an inner dance with somebody, to ask them how do they feel. But when we're doing for 2 or more persons, we are not like, it's not a good idea, or is it a good idea to ask like to each of them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. In big groups, I don't ask those questions. What I do is I channel, meaning I empathize, I come from love on the way to the process. What seems to come up as relevant would be the one that speaks. And normally I do the check-in after the process. I think you don't need too many layers in the beginning because people would tend to absorb each other's energy. If you were, but there would be a difference between handling a workshop and a retreat. Let's say an immersion or a training. Definitely in a training or in an immersion, you want people's energies to support each other. But in a short group process, you would want what would be more cosmic and universal. I tend to hold less human elements when it's a big group. I invoke the universe, the cosmos, nature, Mother Earth. But when it's a long process, the human parts are really important to help people really look at the nature of what they're holding. So duration has a lot to do with it. So I think when I spoke about mapping out or revealing layers, I'm speaking more about deeper conditions, like someone with a disease who's given months to live, someone who's in a deep depression that's urgent, someone who's going into suicide, someone who's really ready to go through a change because of a crisis. Those people would really, like, in a matter of a few sentences, you've already mapped out a lot. It's actually possible that people talk about everything about them in a few sentences if you ask the right question. But you wouldn't want to do that in a group. Partially, it's not always fair to get people to open up. That could allow certain things to get lost in context, because words do have this characteristic in bringing about too much interpretation. So you want to have confidence to be the one that channels the space in the beginning if it's a big group. Just find your voice and be optimal. Don't say too much. Just say what needs to be spoken, and whatever that which is spoken, that would influence the whole journey. So you do want that to be tight. On a one-on-one, you would want to channel more of what's in there that is needing to be looked at, that's not going to come from you as the central channel. Yeah, I hope that helps. I don't know if it was Paula that actually dropped out. Maybe it was her. Okay, so anyone else? Yeah, so I could just close if you guys are feeling full. What I shared with you would take you a while. It could take you a lifetime. It could take you years to unravel. The whole thing is meant to empower you so that you would have it there already, the container. The container doesn't need so much inside it. You could carry a container with very little in it, but it's really going to be up to you to enjoy how to fill it up. So Inner Dance proposes this container. This is usually one of the ways we close a lot of trainings. So again, we cover a lot of the waves. That's the feminine aspect of Inner Dance. When you look at the mandala, the key of 7, this is the masculine. This is that which is consistent. The wave could change. It's up to you. You could bring your interpretations to that. And there are waves inside the mandala in each of those circles or colors. But the actual grid would stay the same. So this would help you to stabilize into pattern recognition. So you could take in a lot of information, but you would still have a kind of map and know where you are at. There could be a lot more talked about and spoken about this, but sometimes it's also good to just say enough, which means a little bit. So I hope this encourages you that when you work in others, that you have a notebook with you. Sometimes someone will say something and you will be, okay, that's so relevant, and then you would lose it in the next sentence, because that's how spoken language or oral tradition works. When you bring an energy literacy, when you know how to hold the information, and when it's there clearly, explicitly held, so it doesn't get lost, you would be able to hold like the layers there. So in the beginning, a lot of it will look like a mess when you jot things down, but there would be intersections and lines interconnecting a lot of those words, concepts, ideas, and insights, because you can see the relationships between sounds, colors, concepts, codes, contexts. You can build on this. You would build on this, the pattern given by nature and by the universe. So I'm happy for you to explore. Maybe you might want to watch this Zoom again. That which I shared here took like a lot of years to put together, and I'm happy it was finally spoken, that we found a way to speak it. Some of it may not be so relevant to you if you're not working with medical or physiological conditions. But if people are telling you that they have certain problems with sleeping, with illness, with feeling weak, just to allow you to be able to read some of those more efficiently, you will need some of what was shared today in your own mapping. But if you don't need it yet, if you're working within a spiritual context, just knowing what it could do to activate very simple localized regions of the brain, especially the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, these endocrine glands inside the brain that control all of the other glands that exhibit sexuality, power, growth, immunity, metabolism, healing, digestion. You can just rest in that what you're doing is a central process that has multiple functions. In the beginning of my own inner dance work, I was being offered by spirit that actually like one solution could work in many, many problems. So you don't need to overanalyze what's the problem for this one. Actually, there could be a one solution that alleviates and solves many, many problems. And if we're working with the hypothalamus, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, you're working on the problem of time. Once again, going back to the deep fear, the fear of death, which is rooted in there's not enough time. There's an insufficiency of time. We need to hurry. We're too late. We're always late. We need to go faster. You should slow down, knowing that this is your gift, that this is your power, this is what you're offering, this is your service, this is your love, that you're giving people more time. And if you can give more time to people, what you're giving them is immortality, that there is no such thing as death, that we are eternal, we are infinite, we are forever. And in that space, people can really make no mistakes. There could be no judgment, there could be no duality. So if you feel like you're slipping away from the unitive state or the space of oneness, it means that you're not taking responsibility over time. Time owns you. Philosophically, the deep question here would be, are you victimized, or are you affected by the brain that holds time? Or are you a consciousness, an energy spirit that programs the brain? You know, what's the chicken or the egg? Was time programmed through long evolution that it's now conditioned in the circadian clock in your brain, which does hold power? That, you know, you do have a certain wave where something rises and falls, but as you take your place, as you hold your gift, you are altering the brain so that it's either this or that. You're either influenced by your clock, or you either can design your clock so that you can have more access to love, to expression, to wisdom, to power, to creativity, to resources, making you sufficient and abundant, and not like lacking, not this, there's not enough, you know, that I'm not enough, there's not enough, and I need more. To just go into this space where you're good, you're okay, you're enough, you have enough. That's already the significant change that is brought about by the actual technology inner dance brings. So we've been putting this into words more and more. You have a greater understanding of what inner dance actually is. We're defining it, we're putting it into words, we're making it clear what the core problem is, and what the core solution could be. So bring this with confidence. You know, I hope you know what you're giving people is actually really, it's core, it's really core. Okay, so let's call it a night. Thank you for your inputs. Yeah, Paula, that was it. Mostly what I said was when you dropped out. Thank you for your, thank you for everyone for your presence. We have 2 more focus calls after this one. We will open up the next calls more for your voicing. I think that so much was already given throughout our time together, that it would really take you a while to internalize what was shared. So we would like you to help to hold the conversation with general questions on what are you taking from all this? What are you learning? What is growing? What is transforming? How do you envision, you know, a new earth coming from what this is, like all of this is speaking? What are the challenges, and what are the things that excite you? So if you could maybe work on that, internalize on that, maybe even inner dance with that. And then actually the last call falls exactly on Ituli's birthday. Without our intention, I scheduled it without realizing that. So we can have a celebration on that last day with her. If you could unmute then and say goodnight. When is our last session? May 5.
Everybody, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Good night. Thank you.
Keep the conversation going.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.